growing up as a person who was in the left my whole life, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Same. I mean, I was on the left until like 3 years ago. Like, I mean, you know,
it's not the left anymore.
It's not the left anymore.
Yeah.
This is the weird thing. It's like the left used to be big on exposing government corruption, but once they control the government, they no longer want to expose the government corruption.
Hello， 大家好，我是立恩。哎呀，今天呢，我是抱着忏悔的心情来做这一支影片呐。因为呢，在1个多月前呢，就有一名网友留言啊，想问问我说，
在等说明马斯克为何支持川普的影片，敲碗。
1个月前的时候，已经是选举投票结果之前了哈。我呢也答应了，一直放在心里啊，但始终没有做出来。那我那个时候一直在想要怎么样呈现，因为毕竟那个时候呢，如果我太用个人的观点的看法的话，那就显得相对的主观。所以呢，按照惯例，我们还不如请本人来告诉我们答案。所以我今天特别请不是请是特别呢，今天放一支影片，是美国知名 Podcast 主持人 Joe Rogan 呢，在这个11月4号的时候，也就是开票结果前几天呢，他特别邀请了 Elon Musk 本人上他的 Podcast 节目，来问他为什么他支持川普。所以让马斯克本人来说我想那毫无疑问的就没什么好争议的了嘛，对吗？好，我先跟大家简单介绍一下 Joe Rogan， 其实他过去是一个支持民主党的一个左派的人物，在美国是一名喜剧演员，也是电视主持人。那更特别的是，如果有在看 UFC 综合格斗的这个观众呢，就会发现怎么 Joe Rogan 的脸很不陌生？没有错他是 UFC 非常有名的一个评论员所以常常会在场边看到他。他的这个在 YouTube 上的播客节目呢，就叫做 Joe Rogan Experience， 在美国来讲流量可以说是大概最高的前几名的播客之一。那更别提2个多月以前呢，他就已经邀请过川普上他的 Podcast，而当天更是创下在短短24小时内就有数百万人次收看，直至目前为止一共已经来到5342万次的播放量了，哇，非常的厉害。很多人都说，其实川普上一次 Joe Rogan 的节目就赢过所有主流媒体对民主党的贺锦丽的这个赞虾了所以呢 Joe Rogan 在美国的影响力是蛮大的而且他的主持风格最大的特点就是他从不事先准备所谓的问题稿，他喜欢很随性的跟着他跟嘉宾的这个访谈的节奏呢，自然的去做联想，或是自然的去引申他更多有兴趣的。他不喜欢事前领稿，这也是他的 Podcast 的节目很大的特点。不过我倒是觉得应该说这样就很简单，比较省时间吧这样做节目来讲的话，其实坦白说挺过瘾的。无论如何呢，我们废话不多说，就让我们一起来看马斯克是怎么来诉说他这一段从民主党的支持者转向成为共和党支持者的心路历程吧。Let's go。
Like basically we want to send a message to the politicians to say that the people care about the Constitution, because there have been all these attacks on the Constitution. They've been, especially on the Democrat side, they've been repeatedly saying that the First Amendment is an obstacle. And they're claiming, the First Amendment is enabling disinformation, misinformation. And I'm like, yo, there's a reason for the First Amendment. Like freedom of speech, the reason the founders of the country put the freedom of speech there is because they came from countries where if you spoke your mind, you would get shot or imprisoned. That's why the First Amendment exists. And the Second Amendment is there to stop the tyranny of government. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is there to protect. And I've had these debates, especially with people in LA, because they're like, want to take everyone's guns away. And I'm like, yo, can you guarantee me that that we will never have a tyrannical government in the United States? Can you make that guarantee? They're like, well, nobody can make that guarantee. I'm like, then we need to keep our guns, because that's what's going to stop it.
That sounds crazy for people to hear, because they think about gun violence and gun problems and gun this and gun that. But that's the reality of the world that we live in, is that tyranny is possible, and it exists other places, and it's slowly existing. It's slowly rearing its head in the UK. I think the number of people that have been arrested for just social media posts is bananas. It's in the thousands.
Yes, several thousand people have been given prison sentences in the UK for social media posts where there was no explicit link to actual violence, but they just said it encouraged violence. I'm like, well, did anyone actually do anything as a result of that? And then they have a prison overcrowding situation in the UK, so that quite literally releasing convicted pedophiles and putting people in jail for Facebook posts. That's an actual thing happening in Britain.
That is so wild.
Like you're like,
it's so wild that people can't see
what the fuck, is going on?
And what's insane to me
Make
is
Orwell fiction again.
Yeah. But it's all being encouraged by the left. Ketanji Brown
Absolutely.
Jackson, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton.
John Kerry was one of the people who said that he's on camera like a few weeks ago saying that the First Amendment is an obstacle to fighting misinformation.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's such a crazy thing to say when you have a solution in community.
You can reply to a post and with evidence that shows that the post is wrong. You can say, here's why you're wrong, here are the reasons, and here's the evidence.
But the argument is that people are too unsophisticated, that they're not going to research these things. They're going to be a victim of misinformation. So they're going to read something that's incorrect. They're going to run with it. People are going to die. We're going to ruin the world because people believed in misinformation. It's a stupid argument.
It's a stupid argument.
Because it's an argument that they're too dumb to know what's right or wrong. Well,
yes.
if you know, because you're saying it's misinformation, why do you think that you're smarter than everybody who reads that?
Exactly. Some broadcast media, they say false things all the time, but it's a one-way street. There's no rebuttal. There's no counter.
Right. Right. Who's apologized for being incorrect about what? Did Rachel Maddow ever apologize for telling everybody that if you get the COVID vaccine, you're never going to get COVID? It won't. The virus stops with you.
No, never.
Never.
Yeah.
No one ever. It's just. It was not true at the time. There was no evidence to support it at the time. It's pure propaganda. And she said it. The RussiaGate hoax. For 3 fucking years, they said that he was Putin's toy, and there's no repercussions.
Yes.
No one had to apologize. Hillary Clinton never came out and apologized for that, and people still listen to her. The whole thing's crazy. And it's all coming from the left, which growing up as a person who was in the left my whole life, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Same. I mean, I was on the left until like 3 years ago. I believe we want freedom. We want to maximize personal liberty. I think we want to be kind to people. We want to have empathy. But it's very important to have personal freedom and a merit-based society. And the left wants to oppress your freedoms, especially freedom of speech, and they want to have a non-merit-based society, with race-based and sex-based preferences. And it's like, well, wait a second. No, we just want people to succeed based on their skills and their hard work.
And if they don't want people to express themselves about particular issues, then they're not doing the will of the people. And if they're trying to suppress people's ability to communicate, they're only doing that because they want to do things that people don't want them to do.
Yes.
And they want to silence opposition. That's all it is. And the 100%. Fact that people can't see that and they want to call Trump a fascist, the whole thing is
it's just
through the looking glass. It's just.
It's like one hoax after another that they're perpetrating against Trump. They try to call the rally at Madison Square Gardens like a Nazi rally. I'm like, yo, there was literally an Israeli flag in the audience. I think a quarter of the speakers were Jewish. There were people of every race, color, creed, religion at that rally. Tell me what about that is Nazi?
No,
and yet it was portrayed as a Nazi rally.
Well, MSNBC, they literally showed video of the Nazi rally from the 1930s and then compared it to the Trump rally. Now, ignoring the fact that fucking Jimmy Carter spoke there.
There have been dozens of political rallies at Madison Square Gardens, dozens on the Democrat side. People on X were like, and here's Jimmy Carter, and here's Bill Clinton, and here's wait a second. Actually, it looks like every presidential candidate has done on the Democrat side has done a rally at Madison Square Gardens. Are they Nazis too?
But what they're doing is they're preying on low information voters who aren't engaged actively on social media, who don't have the time to look through everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If people are just on looking at legacy mainstream media, then they have a totally different worldview than if they're on X and seeing the actual flow of argument.
Yes.
And the actual evidence.
When we found out that that was the case, that the government was actually asking Twitter to remove posts that were factual,
all the time.
They did the same thing to Facebook. They had them throttle pieces of one of Tucker Carlson's show. They suppressed the views by 50%.
Yeah, there was massive government interference in Twitter, but like Twitter welcomed it. That's important to all Twitter welcomed it. All Twitter was controlled by far left activists.
Yeah.
So they welcomed the government interference. They got paid by the government for it.
That's crazy. They
yes.
got paid for their time, correct?
Yeah, they got
Is that
paid
how it
millions of
works?
dollars for suppressing information. FBI had this sort of magic portal into the Twitter system, but all of the communication in that in this portal was auto deleted after 2 weeks, which breaks federal FOIA laws. So we don't even know what was said because it was all deleted after 2 weeks.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's so crazy. It's so crazy that people thought that was okay.
it's super not okay.
No, it's super not okay. It's unconstitutional, and no one would want that. No one would want the government
Yes.
to have that kind of access.
Exactly.
And what was the blowback like when all that stuff got released? Like, you had to anticipate that there was going to be problems when you released that. Like, what happened?
We did lose a lot of advertising dollars.
Which is crazy because it's essentially like one of the most important forms of journalism
Yes.
is exposing government corruption.
Yes, I mean this is the weird thing. It's like the left used to be big on exposing government corruption, but once they control the government, they no longer want to expose the government corruption. As you pointed out, like the left historically, up until I don't know, maybe even 10 years ago or something like that, was the free speech party, and now it's the anti-free speech party, and they use words like oh well, we have to be against hate speech and misinformation, disinformation, but these are propaganda words. You know, it's like, well, who's defining hate speech? Who's defining misinformation? The government? Do you really trust the government to make
Right.
that definition? The whole point of the First Amendment is like, you do not trust the government.
Well, especially when they're wrong and,
Yes,
and there's
and
no
push lies.
repercussions.
Yes.
Yeah, like with the whole lab leak theory, if you would get kicked off of YouTube if you even presented this argument that, hey, maybe that coronavirus lab where they're doing work on the exact same virus that got released,
Yep.
hey, maybe that's where it came from since that's where
Yeah.
the virus started. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
They kick you right off of YouTube.
Yeah.
好，那我跟大家呢讲一个个人非常有趣的观察，只能说是我个人的特别角度的切入哈。大家可以看到，马斯克在2022年4月的时候呢，他就开始积极的宣布说他要收购 Twitter， 好，也就是现在的 X 平台，那前身就是这个叫 Twitter。那 Twitter 我们知道它其实是类似像 Facebook 这样的很大的一个社交媒体，好，像 YouTube 啦。Facebook 啦 Twitter 这个可以说是前3大的自媒体或者说是个人公开的言论平台。好，那马斯克一直呢到2022年10月27号的时候呢，成功的以天价44亿美元完成了 Twitter 的收购。但是有趣的地方在哪里呢？最有趣的地方就是他在10月27号一完成啊，短短不到1个月之内，在11月20号的时候就立刻恢复了前总统川普的推特账号。我刚刚在影片当中也有提到，马斯克其实一直在谈到 Twitter 其实已经很大程度的妥协了这个左派政治圈哈，所以呢 Twitter 就变成呢以这个仇恨性的言论为由呢，就关闭了川普的 Twitter 账号。那当然那个时候是 Joe Biden 执政时期，所以川普只是前总统嘛。可是呢，大家现在就回想起来就会发现，马斯克为什么要收购 Twitter？其实马斯克早就已经酝酿要打倒所谓的左派文化。那有趣的地方在于什么呢？有趣的地方就是马斯克在7月的时候，他还多次的跟川普两个人在空中你来我往，唇枪舌战。
Elon is not going to buy Twitter. Where did you hear that before? From me. Nah, he's got himself a mess. You know, he said the other day, oh, I've never voted for a Republican. I said, I didn't know that. He told me he voted for me. So he's another bullshit artist.
一下子呢，他酸川普，然后川普呢就反酸他。你会发现哦，很有意思。我个人的观察是认为，在那个时候呢，其实恐怕这两个人早就已经心照不宣，自行在全球媒体前面上演了一出这个怼人的大戏。
你一开始就什么都知道，你就是过来陪我演戏的。
马斯克恐怕知道，他想收购 Twitter 的这个计划，其实会引来很多敏感性的神经，特别是民主党在拜登执政期间呢，由于拜登一直要求马斯克的 SpaceX 呢，也就是火箭公司呢，要求他成立工会。好，那马斯克呢，因为他迟迟的不愿意成立这个所谓的工会，搞得呢，拜登一直对马斯克非常的感冒。都是把马斯克冷处理，所以也因为如此，如果马斯克在2022年想要收购推特呢，这一定会挑起民主党一个敏感的神经，因为一定好奇你的背后目的嘛。所以我觉得这也是为什么马斯克呢4月开始他说要收购推特的时候呢，那么先跟川普演一些好像看似两人互相水火不容、互酸的戏码，比较有利于他能够顺利的完成推特收购，免得政治力的介入，推特本身它并不一定会成功的被马斯克收购，
这不是钱的问题。
而一旦马斯克成功收购之后呢，那毋庸置疑，他已经为右派或说共和党这边呢找到了一个最有利的网络媒体了。那这也是为什么我们看到他可以一完成收购就立刻的公开出他的计划，第一步就是先让川普恢复账号。后来呢，马斯克他的这一个司马昭之心已经人尽皆知的时候，左派媒体这个时候才惊觉不妙。左派媒体呢，立刻明显的感受到，原来马斯克完全是奔着右派的保守主义的路线去走的，而且马斯克非常有可能要开始实现他一步步复辟川普的计划。
完了完了！
后来的左派媒体就开始进行许多的抹黑，最明显的就是许多的左派媒体都把马斯克的 S 平台一直往歧视性的仇恨言论的风口浪尖上带过去。那个时候，甚至连英国最有名的左派媒体 BBC 都派记者出动，来跟马斯克进行了一次针锋相对的专访。这也是我今天也要分享给大家看另外一个精彩的地方啦。我第一次钦佩马斯克，他不但是有科学发明的天才头脑之外，第一次深深的被他的口才、思绪的清晰所折服呢，就是这一次他跟英国 BBC 记者的专访。我们来看看马斯克他是怎么一次去戳破这个记者莫须有的指控的谎言吧。
Why did you agree to do this interview with the BBC?
I don't know. I like spontaneity. And I don't know, there's a lot going on, and it seems like I actually do have a lot of respect for the BBC, although sometimes I forget what the BBC stands for, you know. But what does it stand? Just kidding.
You know what it stands for.
Yes, I do. So there's a lot going on. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to answer some questions and. I guess maybe get some feedback too. What should we be doing different?
Do you think you prioritize freedom of speech over misinformation and hate speech?
Well, who's to say that something is misinformation? Who's the arbiter of that? Is it the BBC?
You're literally asking me.
Yes.
Well, no, you are the arbiter on Twitter because you own Twitter.
Yes, I'm saying who is to say that one person's misinformation is another person's information? The point at which you say that there is this is misinformation, like who is going to decide that?
You accept that misinformation can be dangerous, that it can cause real-world harms, that it can potentially cause.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that the BBC itself has at times published things that are false. Do you agree that that has occurred?
I'm quite sure the BBC have said things before that turn out to not be true.
Correct.
In its, whatever it is, 100-year history, I'm quite sure.
Yes. Even if you aspire to be accurate, there are times when you will not be.
Right,
but I think in the grand scheme of things, the BBC does aspire to be accurate.
But you accept there has to be a line in terms of hate speech. I mean, you're not looking at total 100% unrestricted speech.
I generally am of the opinion that if the people of a given country are against a certain type of speech, they should talk to their elected representatives and pass a law to prevent it. So, for example, you cannot advocate murdering someone. That's illegal in the United States, everywhere really, I suspect. So there are limits to speech.
I guess taking your argument to a logical conclusion then, do you accept that there's more misinformation on the platform if it's not being policed in the same way?
I actually think there's less these days because we've eliminated so many of the bots which were pushing scams and spam. And previous management turned a blind eye to the bots because their bonuses were tied to user growth. And if your compensation is tied to user growth, well, you're not going to look too closely at some of the users. That's part of the problem. So I think we've got less misinformation because we don't have the bot problem that we used to do. And we also have given a lot of attention to community notes, which corrects, with community itself, corrects misinformation. It's been very effective.
I would only just add that, we have spoken to people who have been sacked that used to be in content moderation, and we've spoken to people very recently who were involved in moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
what hate
speech
speech are you talking about? I mean, you use Twitter,
right?
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
but just a personal anecdote, like what do you? I don't.
Personally, my for you, I would see I get more of that kind of content, yeah, personally. But I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
So you see more hate speech personally?
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm
just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content. And I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't. Honestly, I
you
don't.
Can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
following.
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see that hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
then I say so that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed.
You just lied.
What I claimed was. There are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally
if you look at something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I've already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time. COVID misinformation. You changed the COVID misinformation.
Has
rules.
BBC changed its COVID misinformation?
The BBC does not set the rules on Twitter, so I'm asking you.
No, I'm talking about the BBC's misinformation about COVID.
I'm literally asking you about, you changed the labels, the COVID misinformation labels. There used to be a policy, and then it then disappeared. Why do that?
Well, COVID is no longer an issue. Does the BBC hold itself at all responsible for misinformation regarding masking and side effects of vaccinations, and not reporting on that at all? And what about the fact that the BBC was put under pressure by the British government to change its editorial policy? Are you aware of that?
This is not an interview about the BBC.
Oh, so. You thought it wasn't?
I see now why you've done Twitter Spaces. I am not a representative of the BBC's editorial policy. I want to make that clear. Let's talk about something else. You want to talk about the BBC?
You too.
All right, let's talk about something else.
You weren't expecting that.
Let's talk about something else.
Do you like the BBC? Do you like BBC?
Okay, yeah, we're not going to do this.
Oh, I can't interview you.
Obviously, I work for the BBC.
But do you like BBC?
I know. I see what you're doing. I'm not going to respond to that. Okay, I think we can finish the interview there. If you want to continue, thank you very much.
我第一次看到马斯克原来开怀大笑的时候，放开来笑，声音还挺魔性的啊。不得不说呢，在他的笑声里头，我充分的感受了他击破这个 BBC 记者抹黑的成功的快感啊。那你也可以就只知道，马斯克在这个时候，他等于跟左派的关系近乎到水火不容，或者说十分对立的情况了。好，以上呢只是我们马斯克的复仇大计的上集，因为呢时长的关系呢，我不得不分上下集。下集呢，我们来继续来看马斯克是真的如此的痛恨左派吗？还是有什么不可告人的秘密，而使得他做出了一次是要把左派消灭的原因呢？欲看下集的观众朋友，请继续锁定我们超级神队友，我们下期再见，拜拜。
Christ alone, our hope now forever.